So today we're going to start talking about data analytics and kind of how to approach it with Azure. I want to start off by first just talking through some statistics. So Microsoft commissioned IDC to do some surveys. Some surveys were sent out to about 509 institutes to collect information about how ready institutes were, or higher EDU was ready for artificial intelligence. Part of artificial intelligence isn't just doing cool things with your data or predicting outcomes. It kind of starts at the very beginning with collecting and storing that data in a central location, and then being able to build models off of that data when you have the right questions to ask. So anyway, these higher ed institutes that responded to this survey had said that 71% of them wanted to improve efficiency inside of the institutes using artificial intelligence or machine learning, and then the other another 63% of them, or the same 63%, said that they wanted better student engagement. And then you can see that 54% of them have started experimenting with some type of artificial intelligence, and 38% of them have adopted some part of artificial intelligence as a core strategy. So what that means to me is that it's pretty important in education to start understanding how to implement AI or machine learning successfully. AI and machine learning, a lot of people, think those are buzzwords, but at the end of the day, it's really advanced analytics. It's how you take your data and do something with it to change an outcome. 99, almost all institutes had responded that they have multiple use cases for artificial intelligence, machine learning, advanced analytics. When we start talking about kind of the getting into advanced analytics, regardless of the platform, there's some stages that you really should be looking at to mature that part of your portfolio, and that kind of starts with a vision. That vision is really what's the strategy. We need to set a culture for AI. Get everybody on board. Let them know that this is the path forward, and really get a lot of interest or buzz around that. And then you need the right people to implement this. So that's going to be anywhere from your DBAs that know the data really well, that's in your current apps. It's going to be data integration engineers that can move data around and do some amazing things by shaping that data. And then it's going to be people that can build reports, tell stories with that data, and then data scientists who can, take that data, build a model around it, and answer some questions for you. So process-wise, really, I don't think of this as just kind of IT processes. This is really business processes too. So how your business addresses data today, if you have silos, breaking down those silos. If you've got heavy investment in one or two technologies, how are those technologies going to enable you to, to improve your process for storing data, collecting data, and serving it out so that you can have the, this artificial intelligence. And then technology is a pretty big one. I would have to say that Microsoft, Amazon, Google, all the major cloud providers are all fairly similar. Some of them have some unique niches, and some of them also have better than other technologies for things like artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, you do need some type of technology to do this. You can certainly build an artificial intelligence or machine learning model on your laptop and run it, and it could run for days to churn through thousands of rows of data and get you the result that you need, but that's not really the point. Having artificial intelligence should be available at your fingertips to answer those questions right away, instead of waiting days for something like that, or having a server farm and having different groups fight for resources for that server farm to run their models. That's also an issue that I've seen in institutes. Number 5 is the one that we're really going to focus on today. I think that's a really key piece is your data readiness. Are you really ready to take on an AI project? Are you really ready to take data and feed it through a machine learning model, or are you not? A lot of times, everybody that I talk to, they want AI, they know they need AI, but at the end of the day, they need to start at the beginning of centralizing data, getting that data into a place where it can be read easily into that model, and then continually feeding that data into that central location so that that model can learn and get better. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Another quick stats on the IDC surveys that were sent out. As you can see, pretty much every institute, regardless of size, is basically in the same boat as far as data availability and data quality. So better than halfway, so about 2.5 points out of 4 points. If you read the points on the right, basically having a 4 would mean that you have all of your data in one place. You have it accessible to everybody that's at your institute, so that they can all build interesting models or even just do reporting on. So data availability is kind of a number 1 issue, right? And then the data quality is again about halfway there for most organizations. So data quality just means that you've got the right business rules applied to it as far as calculations, things like that go. You don't have any major issues in using that data, meaning when you bring it into like a reporting application, that you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours cleaning that data. It's ready for you. So it's another major struggle to think about as we kind of go through these slides. So now I want to present you with a use case. So we're talking about kind of all of education. So I felt like this was a really good use case to kind of talk through because it tells a great story. So FORSYTH County schools, there are about 40 schools and centers. They have about 8,000 full-time and part-time employees. They have more than 50,000 students. They have a lot of students. Their number 1 business problem that they wanted to solve is their graduation rate. So they have a really good graduation rate of 94%, but that last 6% of students, they wanted to try and make their lives better, right? Improve the outcome and get to as close to 100% as possible. They have a technical problem in that the data that they're using to assess these kids, these students, is siloed data, right? So like, think about kind of the processes that you and your department go through right now. If you needed some other department's data, or is it there? Is it available? Or do you have to jump through a bunch of hoops, to get to that data? I'm not talking about data security here, just accessibility. If you're supposed to have access to that data, do you have access, or do you have to go and find it, manually download it, and then manipulate it, right? So that's one of the problems that they had. The other problem that they had was that the school leaders were individually analyzing student data. So on an individual basis, they would get to see kind of that student's full picture of are they going to be successful in our ecosystem or not, which isn't great, especially when you think about 51,000 students. How are you ever going to have enough people to look at all of those students and make sure that you are improving their lives? You don't. So you have to do something else. You have to take all of that data and let a computer do that for you, and then you drive the outcomes by seeing different indicators. I'll touch on the products and services that were used in a later slide, but just they're kind of centralized on Azure and Power BI. Okay, so the approach that FORSYTH took to solve their problem, both their business problem and their technical problem, they took a three-phased approach. So the first thing that they wanted to do is take all that siloed data, consolidate it, build a foundation, and then just start reporting, right? So they were doing individual reporting, individual analysis. That, again, that's not good enough when you have 50,000 students. So first phase is just to get it all in one spot and then build the business rules around the data and then start reporting, get visibility into all of the data, all of the students at one time. The second phase of their strategy was to standardize the data collection. So instead of having, software A do this and software B do that, maybe you've got like a Python package running and doing web scraping and grabbing data out, and then you have an SSIS package that goes and grabs data from your databases, and then you still have to do something with it, right? So standardizing that data collection. And then the last thing that they wanted to do is use that historical information to answer new questions, right? Predict trends and behaviors so that they can identify those students, that 6%, identify things that will improve their outcome, right? Help them graduate. So if we look at this from an architecture standpoint, on the very left-hand side, you've got your data sources. Data sources can be really anything that has data that you need out of it. So it could be databases that you have, it could be files and logs that are generated from an application or a web server. It could be website data, so census information, things that you connect to with an API and grab out, right? So you need all kinds of different data, and you will find that once you kind of get through this centralization problem and you start historically reporting on all of your data and you start asking those questions of your data and trying to build models, that you will eventually have to bring in external data. Some departments are probably doing that already, but again, if there's 3 or 4 different departments all pulling census data in, why not identify that and put it as part of the centralized process for data movement and storage, so that everybody has that data. It's all the same, and you don't have to worry about making some new process to get that information. And then at the end of the day, after you've moved it and you're storing it centrally, then you have to have a presentation layer, right? A layer that allows non-analytical or data science type people to get to information easily and to get to information from a lot of different platforms. So I think you've probably heard over and over today how great or how easy all of these different Microsoft services are to use in this kind of work from home or educate from home type of situation that we're in. So Power BI is one of the tools. Power BI is a great visualization tool. It's a great platform for self-service, and it also integrates with things like Teams, so that you can have a user being remote, having Teams open, and accessing reports from Power BI inside of Teams, right? So they have a single platform to use to get to all of their stuff. They can also go out to the app, or from a mobile device, they would be able to pull up reports and see things, at any given time. So really, that presentation layer, I think, is very critical in that you need to think through the non-technical people accessing that information and accessing it from a platform that they understand and is very intuitive, right? So things like Teams, the web service, or the mobile phone. So if we look at this in a different lens, basically more of an Azure specific lens, this is what it would look like, right? So at the end of the day, your data sources are probably going to change over time, but they're always going to be on the left and moving in to the right. So you're going to connect to those data sources and then centrally move that data through a pipeline, store it somewhere, and then you might have to manipulate it depending on your process of extracting, transforming, and loading, or transforming after loading. But at the end of the day, you're storing it centrally. And then once it's stored centrally, you have the ability to do things like apply machine learning to rows of data or to aggregated data. And then that machine learning, that artificial intelligence that you're applying, can feed back into your central data repository, or even feed into that reporting tool, right? So again, giving those non-technical end users that need to help improve, graduation rates or engagement with students, things like that, that they're going to need that platform to access and look at things in a non-technical lens. So let's move one step closer by applying kind of FORSYTH school's 3 main objectives. So if we look at consolidating data and building a foundation, right? So that basically what that looks like is maybe taking your data sources, moving them through a pipeline, landing them in a data lake. So data lake is primarily, think of a data lake as a way to land raw unmanipulated data that doesn't have any rules applied to it. And you would do this with cloud technology because if you try and transform data here, you're restricting to how large of a server farm you have in your data center or your institute. So if we just take the raw data and move it along and land it in the data lake, just in its raw form, then we have the ability to use as much horsepower as we need to transform and manipulate that data to then land it into our data warehouse or even our data mart, right? It doesn't have to be a data warehouse if it's not large, but at that point you have all of the data and all of the business rules applied to that data when it's landing into that centralized location. So that's kind of your standardized data collection, right? So you've got your data moving in, and then you've got a standard way to collect it and transform it. And then you have historical data. So again, historical data reporting in Power BI, that's probably something that sounds fairly easy. It is fairly easy once you have all of your data centralized. And then the trickier part that comes in is kind of the predictive trends and behaviors. So in order to get to that level of information, you need to use something like Azure Machine Learning Studio or Databricks. So they are both very good at taking large amounts of data and applying some type of algorithms or models to essentially come to a prediction or a trend, basically. And all of that can feed right back into Power BI. So you have up-to-date reports, and you can also even feed in information in real time into those models if you have a need for that. If you wanted to do, some type of like sentiment analysis from like social media pages or even, campus website pages, things like that, you could do things very easily with Azure ML or with Databricks. So what does success look like for this school? So they had a strategy. Well, first they saw the gaps that they had in the opportunities that they had to improve students' lives, right? And then they came up with a strategy, and that was a 3-phased strategy. They laid a solid foundation, and then they worked with technical experts, learned along the way, and executed. And then they deployed all of this into production, and now they're predicting outcomes for students. So you can see on the right some of kind of the Power BI visuals that they're using. So you have, a prediction of a graduation for this student and categories that explain why, they're predicting that. So the student has a really high GPA, they're not that tardy, things like that, right? So they have all these different variables or factors that help predict that. So, effectively, you can go in as a teacher or a leader of the school and look at this and identify the ones that are maybe slipping a little bit, or even they're going to slip. Maybe they're on, on the bubble and they're, going to go one way or the other. You can see why that is, and you can help them through that. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about our approach to this. Our approach probably isn't a lot different than other people's, other than the fact that we ask a lot of why questions. So in an envisioning phase in our approach to solving these problems, we ask a lot of questions about why. So I need to predict, that, something's going to happen. Well, why do you need to do that? What are you going to do with that information? If we give you historical information, what's the next step? If you see that a student has a very low GPA, what other pieces of information do you need to know to make a better assumption that that student is either going to graduate or not going to graduate, right? So asking those why questions and building a solid business case. So defining what it is that we're going to try and do. And then another area that I think sometimes gets mixed up is the mock-up phase, right? So after we've defined what it is we're going to go after, let's define what it's going to look like in the end. So let's mock up what the reports are going to look like, and let's talk through those details. So if you need to predict who's going to graduate, what information needs to go in this dashboard? And let's draw that up and we'll ask questions again. Why? Why do you need this piece of information? What underlying data do we need in order to predict this? Then we do some investigation. So we go through and look at the data that you have, make sure that we can answer all the questions that have been defined and mocked up. If we don't have all the data, what do we need to do to get the data? And then we build a model around it, right? So we do a proof of concept. So let's model out, let's get some of the sample data, let's model it out, let's make sure that we can do this. Okay, we can do it, let's move on. Let's now build out all the pieces that we've identified between the start of this and the envisioning and the mock-up, investigation, modeling. Let's build all of that out and make sure that we have all of the pieces and components in order to successfully solve what's been defined. And then after we build it all, there's obviously some validation. So validation that either if we're doing predictions that the model doesn't have bias, that it's using samples, if it's just historical reporting and analytics, that the data is valid, so doing calculations manually, making sure that they work correctly, or if you've got an existing Excel spreadsheet that you manually put data in and it calculates things out in macros, that we are using that historical data to validate the new data, so that you can be ensured that this automated process now is going to have all that right data. Once we've done all that, we publish it out, and then we go back through the process again. Going back through the process allows us to iterate quickly, right? So an agile approach to solving problems in smaller chunks, rather than trying to take on a very, very large business problem. We break it up into smaller business problems and solve those problems. All right, so if this was informative, but you don't really know where to go or what to do next, if you've got silo data and you need help breaking down those silos, if you've got all of your data in a good spot and it's centralized and you want to get started with machine learning or artificial intelligence, or if you just need help with data visualization. If you're migrating off of several different data platforms, you want to talk more about how Power BI can kind of enable your organization to serve itself and kind of be a centralized ecosystem. We can do those kinds of things with you. So our offer is really just a quick start workshop. If you just need a couple hours of time to kind of talk through more in depth on your case or your situation, we'd be more than happy to do that with you. We have a lot of different Power BI offerings, but we can jump in and do a quick POC to prove out either that Power BI is a right fit for your institute. We can do a POC around like data security. So if you're worried about maybe you've got Power BI, but it's not centrally adopted or used, and there's questions about how secure it is or how you can secure your data, we can do a quick POC about that. We provide governance workshops around Power BI, so we can help you establish kind of the rules and operations that are going to govern your self-service or your your institute-driven reporting needs. From a data perspective, if you need help moving data, integrating it, standing up data lakes, starting to use Azure Synapse and setting the rules for how data gets queued for MVPs or high-profile people. Things like that, we can help out with those things. We can even just stand up a quick POC of Azure Data Factory to ingest data from your line of business apps or your databases that collect student information or other information. We can throw a Data Factory in there, get it piped into an Azure SQL database if you've got a small amount of data, or Synapse if you want to explore kind of more of a data warehouse. We can do POCs around those things. And then again, if you've got all of that on the left and you're good to go, and you just really need to focus on solving your first AI problem or ML problem, whether it be predicting an outcome or maybe even image recognition, things like that. Those are things that we can help with, and we can do POCs. So if you are interested in any of this, there's contact information at the bottom that will be shared out with you after these sessions. But feel free to ask. And I'll jump over to the Q&A and see if we have any questions.
Yeah, hey, Noah, I got a couple of questions for you. I'm a person that manages a lot of our data using spreadsheets, and I'm bringing in different forms of data from all over the place in these spreadsheets and producing reports out of them. Very interested in starting to use something like Power BI to help automate some of that for me, and especially allowing to build better reports out of it. Is that something I would need to bring IT in to help me do that, or is Power BI something easy to kind of learn and pick up to be able to do that type of work for me?
Sure, that's a great question. Thanks, Ryan. So if you've got a lot of different spreadsheets, or maybe even you have access to a couple of databases, Power BI is a really great tool that allows you to connect to multiple data sources. So multiple Excel spreadsheets or CSV files, or that SQL database that you have running in your department, and you can grab all of that, bring it into a central location, and then easily basically create a data model to serve your needs, and then build some reports off that, and that can serve your department and kind of replace trying to collect all of that information in Excel, and maybe even build visuals or Power Pivot in Excel. You can do all of that right in Power BI.
And a follow-on question to that, definitely want to be able to then share that out, and maybe I'm able to bring a lot of that together, build these reports, and then share that out with others. But I am a little bit concerned about security of where this could eventually get shared out to. Are there some safeguards in there? How would I address the security once I start sharing this out?
Yeah, great. Another great question. So Power BI is, as far as I know, one of the only tools that's got some advanced security capabilities in it from a visualization and reporting standpoint. So there is just container or access level security. So only these people in my department can access this workspace, which has my reports in it. So that's layer one. And then you can actually build security into your data model so that you can say, in my department, who has access to this report, only this group of people can see this data, and only this group of people can see this data. That can easily be applied. So that's access and the data model area of security. And then on top of all of that, there is this thing called information protection services, which is available in Microsoft 365. It essentially allows you to build out these things called sensitivity labels. So you can say that this data is high sensitivity. And then what that does is it applies rules that's in information protection services to say that this data can't leave the organization, or this data cannot be exported from Power BI. So what that would look like really is that you apply this sensitivity label to your reports, and then if somebody tried to go and export that to CSV and there's a rule that says they can't do that because it's highly sensitive, it'll just tell them that this feature is blocked. Or if they export that to an Excel because they need to analyze it, and your sensitivity label says that it can't leave the organization, as soon as somebody tries to save that out to like an external drive or send it via email, it'll block that data. They won't be able to see that data, right? So you have to be signed in as your account that has access in Excel to be able to view that data.
Great. No, thank you. And some of the different services and products like Power BI that you talked about today, are there free trials available that I can start trying this out and maybe even do a little bit on my own as far as some self-education before I reach out for help?
Absolutely. So anybody can go to apps.powerbi.com and download Power BI Desktop. So that's essentially your kind of starting point. So Power BI, and there's a lot of training videos there too. So there's a good amount of content to get you kind of started in how do you connect to an Excel file, and how do you create your first bar chart, things like that. There's a lot of great videos on the Power BI website. But Power BI Desktop is free. So basically you can download it and install it and start modeling your data, joining things together, and then at the point where maybe you want to try and share it out to your department, if it's available in your tenant, you can actually sign up for a free 90-day trial of Power BI service, which then allows you to share with other people in your department.
That's all I got. Thanks, Noah.
All right, great. I appreciate staying with me this entire time. Mike, I'll hand it back over to you. I don't have anything else. Thanks, everyone.